Monsters in the Family, Episode 3, Finding the Crow in the Clan. Welcome to Monsters in the Family, a multi-episode series brought to you by Bedcrime Stories Podcast. I'm your host, T. Let's start off with a brief synopsis of the previous episodes. If you haven't listened to episodes 1 and 2, I suggest that you do that before listening to episode 3. 3 to 4 hours after 4-year-old Gregory Villemin disappears from his front yard in L'Éponge, France, on October 16, 1984, his lifeless body is discovered floating in the Vallon River in the neighboring village of Docelle. It's clear from the get-go that this was no accident. First, the anonymous crow announced the crime by calling Gregory's uncle, Michel Villemin, and telling him that he's thrown the child into the river. Second, when Gregory is discovered, his hands and feet are bound with cord, and his wool cap has been pulled down over his face and secured with the rope. The little boy was abducted in broad daylight, bound like a sacrificial lamb, and then thrown into the swift-flowing Vallon River. Yet no one seems to have witnessed a thing. At first glance, it would appear as if the crow worked under a cloak of invisibility and vanished into thin air. Even today, 37 years later, no one knows for certain exactly what happened after Gregory was taken and how long it was before he was placed in the river. Gregory's parents, Jean-Marie and Christine Villemin, and the local military police believe that at least one and possibly several relatives in the Villemins' extended clan colluded to pull off the carefully orchestrated and timed crime. You may recall from previous episodes that the anonymous crow had been harassing Jean-Marie and Christine, as well as Jean-Marie's parents, Albert and Monique Villemin, for several years prior to the crime, through more than 800 menacing phone calls and a series of handwritten letters. Whoever the crow is, he's privy to long-buried family secrets, which makes it clear that he and or she, or they, share bloodlines with the victim and are among the clan. Gregory's parents tell the police that the crow has made threats in the past, but never followed through with the worst of them. Not until now. When we ended episode 2, the local military police captain, Etienne Sesma, had just ordered firefighters in the village of Docelle to retrieve Gregory from the Vallon River. Gregory's parents were reeling from news that their precious little boy was dead, and Jean-Marie had just seen his son's body at the fire station in Docelle. We'll pick up from the point of view of Police Captain Sesma of the Gendarmerie in Bruyères. Sesma is on the scene at the riverbank in Docelle, and he goes with the firemen to the nearby station with Gregory. The firemen cover Gregory's body with a blanket and drive it to the nearby fire station. Remember, the town of Docelle is so small and rural that there's no hospital and no police station. Once at the fire station, the men gently lay the child on a workbench. At 9:30 p.m., Dr. Petit, a local doctor who's been called to the scene, begins a preliminary examination of the body. When Dr. Petit removes Gregory's wool cap, he's startled to see a serene expression on the child's face. Gregory looks as if he's contentedly sleeping. There are no signs of fright or fear etched into his expression, and his eyes are closed. When Dr. Petit gently opens them, he sees that Gregory's pupils are dilated. This means there's no cerebral activity. The doctor informs the police that Gregory has been in the water for some time, but he cannot say with certainty exactly how long. There are no signs of a physical attack, no bruises, no wounds, no marks on his wrists, no blood, nothing to indicate a struggle. At the hour of 9:30 p.m., the body is still somewhat flexible, the skin just a little hard, and the jaw closed. Based on the jaw's position and rigidity, Dr. Petit estimates that Gregory most likely died around 6 p.m. But again, this is just an estimate. Dr. Petit also notices a light white foam on Gregory's lips and nostrils. When the examination concludes, and after Gregory's father has seen him, Gregory's body is transported toward the commune of Épinal. The body will undergo a full autopsy with 2 trained pathologists the next day in the larger city of Nancy. After the exam, Captain Sesma drives to L'Éponge to speak with Gregory's parents. When he arrives at the Villemin home on the hill, he sees a dozen or so people out front. All appear to be in a state of shock. Captain Sesma is told that Gregory's father, upon hearing that his son was found, has left for Docelle and has not yet returned. They also tell him that Gregory's mother, Christine, is inside under the care of a doctor. Some people speak to Captain Sesma in an aggressive, hostile manner, as if they believe he could have prevented Gregory's death. Without access to the parents, Captain Sesma decides to leave and drive back to the police station in Bouillère. That night, the prosecutor tells Captain Sesma and his team to start investigating the crime in flagranti delicto. The in flagranti delicto procedure is reserved for only the most serious crimes. It allows police to legally begin investigating a crime immediately after the act has been committed. This means that the police can start conducting searches, seizing property, and putting people in jail as needed before a prosecutor has formally opened an investigation and before he or she has assigned a judge of inquiry to the case. In France, a judge of inquiry is assigned to all criminal cases, and he or she is in charge of the investigation. When news of Gregory's murder is announced on the radio, late on October 16th, the lady in Docelle, who saw what she thought was a light blue garbage bag in the river, experiences a horror-filled moment of recognition. The day after the crime, Wednesday, October 17th, 1984, at approximately 11 a.m., the postmaster in L'Éponge calls a local military police station to alert them that a suspicious letter will be arriving at Jean-Marie and Christine Villemin's house on the hill. When news of little Gregory Villemin's death is whispered from café to café and villager to villager, the postman suddenly recalled that an odd envelope with a handwritten address in a jerky cursive style had arrived late on the afternoon of the crime. The police call Jean-Marie at his parents' house in Aumazé, where he and Christine spent the night. The police then drive with Jean-Marie to his house on the hill to retrieve the letter. When they open the mailbox, the crow's letter is there waiting for them. The police open the letter in Jean-Marie's presence. Addressed to him, it is brief and it cuts like the knife of a hunter. The letter reads, "I hope you die of sadness, boss. Your money cannot bring back your boy. This is my revenge, you poor bastard." End quote. Police Captain Sesma later writes of the letter in his book about the case. It is extraordinary that a criminal would sign his crime in this way. What he writes perfectly sums up his feelings and his motive. It was Jean-Marie that he wanted to target. The mentions he makes of Jean-Marie's position and his money betray the Crow's envy and jealousy, as well as the term boss, which is used here in a derogatory manner, as is the wording poor bastard, which is aimed at further humiliating the victim's father." End quote. So why didn't the Crow just kill Jean-Marie instead? Well, think about it. It's a lot easier to kidnap and control a small, innocent, trusting child than a grown man who can sense danger and fight back. The Crow is a coward. He selects a victim who cannot oppose him. He's been dying to push Jean-Marie off his high horse. By taking the life of his beloved and extraordinary child, the Crow has inflicted the ultimate amount of pain. The Crow destroyed the one thing that Jean-Marie and Christine Villemin could never replace, their delightful child Gregory. The Crow is, in all likelihood, a psychopath. Psychopaths lack empathy and are callous. They bully and abuse even those they're close to, and they are also known to seek revenge. The police immediately take the Crow's letter into custody. If they can lift fingerprints from it, they can hopefully find the perpetrator. In further examining the letter, the police discover that it was mailed in the outside mail slot of the post office in downtown L'Éponge on October 16th, the day of the crime, and was postmarked at 5:15 p.m. It's also clear that the Crow had the letter pre-written and in pocket before he nabbed Gregory. Premeditation. Now we know that the sun set on October 16th of 1984 in L'Éponge, France, at approximately 5:43 p.m. So whoever abducted Gregory and placed the letter in the outdoor mail slot on a busy downtown street did so in broad daylight. Either the perpetrator was incredibly brazen, or he was so sick and obsessed with getting revenge that he was willing to take great risks to carry out the evil plot. Today, if someone tried to pull this off during the day on a downtown street in front of a post office without being seen, the odds of not being captured on a security camera would be slim to none. But in 1984, in a small town in rural France, the only threat would be the prying eyes of other villagers. The letter that arrives is actually the fourth that the Crow has sent to the Villemins, and copies of the Crow's 3 previous letters are already in the police files. Remember, Jean-Marie's father, Albert Villemin, first reported the Crow to the police back in 1982 after receiving hundreds of anonymous and threatening phone calls from him at the family home in Aumozé. When the Crow showed no signs of stopping his sick calls, Albert and Monique began recording them. They wanted to study the person's raspy voice and share it with their grown children in an effort to figure out who the Crow was. This anonymous entity had been harassing the nuclear Villemin family since 1981. Months and months of pure, incessant hell. The only reason Jean-Marie and Christine are caught off guard on the afternoon of October 16th is because for nearly a year and a half, the Crow had fallen silent. He'd stopped calling, stopped sending letters, gone MIA. In this manner, the Crow lulled the Villemins into thinking that he had been placated, that whatever had driven him to these acts was now a thing of the past. And they believed that their 4-year-old son Gregory could now safely play outside their house on the hill without the crow lurking nearby. You see, the crow had previously threatened to hurt Gregory, but that was more than a year and a half earlier. Jean-Marie and Christine likely never fathomed that this crow person was truly capable of hurting their 4-year-old child. The trickery and the deviousness that the crow displayed are mind-boggling. Under Captain Sesma's guidance, the investigators get a hold of the archived records from their initial investigation in 1982 into the anonymous calls that were made to Albert and Monique Villemin's home. Within the files, they find photocopies of the crow's 3 earlier letters, as well as a dozen or so handwriting tests that the police subjected various members of the Villemin and Jacquel families to back in 1982. You may recall that the Jacquels are related to the Villemins through marriage. Albert's stepson, Monique's firstborn son, Jackie Villemin, is married to Lillian Jacquel. She's the daughter of Roger Jacquel, who happens to be a union representative at the Autocuisson factory where Gregory's father, Jean-Marie Villemin, is a foreman. Jean-Marie failed to join the workers' union at the factory. As a result, Roger Jacquel openly despises Jean-Marie. Back in 1982, the local military police wiretapped Albert and Monique's house and their phone in a bid to catch the crow. Surprisingly, as soon as the wiretap was installed, the crow stopped calling. Did someone within the nuclear Villemin family who knew about the wiretap tip the crow off? It certainly looks like it. But who? No one knows for sure, but some have their suspicions. When the anonymous calls stopped, the police stopped investigating. Why investigate an anonymous caller if he's no longer calling? As a result, experts were never called in to analyze the crow's 3 handwritten letters and the handwriting tests done by members of the Villemin and Jacquel families. But now, in 1984, now that a little boy is dead by the crow's hand, those earlier letters and handwriting tests suddenly become all important. The prosecutor, who was assigned to the Gregory Villemin case temporarily the night before, must now assign a judge of inquiry to it. The judge of inquiry will be the ultimate arbiter of who investigates the crime. He can either leave the case in the hands of the local military police, or he can hand it over to the Police Nationale, or National Police. In France, there are 3 police systems: la Police Nationale, la Gendarmerie, and la Police Municipale. The Police Nationale, or National Police, are responsible for police services in Paris and other large urban areas. La Gendarmerie, or the local military police, provides security services to smaller rural areas. So far, only the local military police have been involved because they were the ones with boots on the ground when Gregory was abducted and located in the Valone River. The prosecutor ends up assigning the case to Judge Jean-Michel Lambert. The Gregory Villemin case will be number 180 out of 229 cases that Judge Lambert will oversee in 1984. At 32 years old, Lambert is overly confident and also overwhelmed by a heavy caseload. Soon, Judge Lambert will find himself under the glare of the media spotlight, followed everywhere he goes, and inundated with reporters' questions. Instead of shunning the limelight, Judge Lambert is drawn to it like a moth to a flame. he becomes enchanted with his sudden fame. Puffed up with pride and a sense of power, Lambert enjoys the way reporters and photographers bow to him. In time, Judge Lambert will prove himself highly susceptible to manipulation by unscrupulous reporters and ruthless lawyers willing to help their client no matter how guilty he or she may look. Right from the start, Lambert makes critical errors in the investigation. The first one is judging the Gregory Villemin case a simple affair, for it is anything but. Lambert decides to leave the investigation in the hands of the local military police. Although it's a major crime with major media interest, the epicenter of the case is in a small rural region. Its cast of characters live in the region. The local military police live and work in that same region. They're more familiar with the population than the national police, and they have contacts among the villagers, contacts who may have seen or heard something about the crime. The director of the Gregory investigation, the main boss, if you will, is one Commander Charles Chaillon. Commander Chaillon heads the Section de Recherche, or SR for short. The SR covers a large geographical area and is brought in on complex criminal cases. 4 officers will work under Commander Chaillon. On the local level, Police Captain Etienne Sesma is officially assigned to the case. He will be working with a team of 20 or so other officers. Another investigative brigade, La Brigade de Recherche, will examine the Crow's voice recordings. In all, about 36 policemen and investigators will collaborate on the case. Commander Chaillon and Captain Sesma will work together in tandem. Right from the start, the two agree on which lines of inquiry or leads to pursue and who to assign them to. Police Captain Sesma and his team start the investigation with 3 lines of inquiry. The first line of inquiry is the Jacquel family, which includes Jean-Marie's half-brother Jackie Villemin, Jackie's wife Liliane, and Liliane's parents Roger and Paulette Jacquel. The second line of inquiry is the Crow's call to Michel Villemin. The third line of inquiry is the scene of the abduction, the Villemins' front yard. The investigators are also paying special attention to the Crow's 4th letter, the one in which he claimed responsibility for the crime. After the police seize the letter from the Villemins' mailbox, they take it to the research brigade for analysis. The forensic analysts trained on how to process such evidence. When Captain Sesma arrives at the brigade to see how things are going, he observes the analysts in the middle of meticulously brushing black magnetic fingerprint powder over every square inch of the letter and its envelope. Hoping to lift the perpetrator's fingerprints from the paper, the analysts are disappointed when the procedure yields no results. And although the analysts were using a method that they were taught, they will later be widely criticized for it. Brushing all that black powder over the paper has left the document in such a state that it will be very complicated now to try and detect other clues on the paper. Captain Sesma says in his book about the case, if the analysts had found fingerprints, it would have changed the course of the case. They would have been celebrated as heroes, and there would have been no criticism of their work. Sadly, that was not the case. And for those of you who may be asking, why didn't they use DNA testing? It's important to note that although the science of DNA testing did make great strides in the early 80s, it wasn't enough evolved to uncover the perpetrator in the Villemin case at that time. In the 1980s, a technique called restriction fragment length polymorphism, or RFLP analysis, became the first genetic test using DNA. However, RFLP was mostly just suited to paternity tests, and it required a lot of DNA material, not just scant amounts. Note that the DNA has been tested throughout the years as advances in testing have been made. I am personally hoping that there's still enough DNA material to continue having it tested every time an advance in the science is made. At this point, the police are well aware of the Crows' multi-year campaign of harassment against the Villemins. Based on the Crows' intimate knowledge of the skeletons in the Villemins' closet, as well as his ability to know what was happening in real time at Monique and Albert Villemin's house in Aumazé, the police conclude that the Crow is a family relative who also resides in Aumazé. And after examining the knots used to bind Gregory's hands and ankles, the police further profile the perpetrator as someone who works in a local textile factory. Even though the knots are unique, every textile worker in the valley of the Vallon pretty much knows how to make them. The police are hoping that if they look long enough at the Villemin family and its extended clan, they will eventually unmask the Crow. And if they find the Crow, they will have found the person who took the 4-year-old child's life. Next time on Monsters in the Family, we'll delve into what the various persons of interest in the case were up to on the day of the crime. Until the next time on Bed Crime Stories. Now hit that like button, people. Throw me a bone. Make my day.